is our fabulous speaker. I'm so excited. This is one of my all-time favorite speakers. I still quote stories that he told in the very first talk he ever made to Launchpad, which has to be 20 years ago, about being a little kid growing up in St. Vincent's church and what he wanted to be when he was 8 years old. And his name is Jeff Johanigman, which is another reason I like him. He is the owner of People Type Consulting, and his title is Turning Work into Play. He is the founder and principal consultant of People Type Consulting, which is an Austin-based training, consulting, and career development firm specializing in applications of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. Through his career, he has established one of the country's first alumni career service programs for the University of Texas. He has managed worldwide staffing for the Tivoli Systems division of IBM. He has coached hundreds of people to find greater career success and fulfillment. He has founded 2 successful software companies, producing over 20 published computer games. He has performed as a professional magician, actor, and theme park character. He played Yogi Bear. Too funny. I didn't know that. He holds a Master of Arts in Human Services from St. Edward's University and a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from Cornell University. He is an active member of the American Society for Training and Development, Toastmasters International, and the Austin Career Development Network. Let's give a rousing welcome to Jeff Johanigman. Yay.
Yay.
All right, I can unmute myself now. Good morning, everybody. I am always excited to come here and present. And I've known Kathy for, I guess you said, about 20 years now, give or take. So we all started this when we were in kindergarten together. And I'm always delighted to come speak, and I can never say no to Kathy. Anytime she wants me anywhere, I am there. And part of it is because Kathy is always so generous in being nice to us speakers. One of the last times I spoke, I got a nice present from Kathy here. She considered me a good headmaster, so I got a nice Dumbledore fez. And a friend of mine said, yeah, I'm not sure if I can recall your name, but I never forget a fez. So thank you so much for that. Before we begin, I'm going to share a document that if you guys want to go to that link, there is a Google Doc that I put up there that I use as a handout for sharing notes. And so for the first couple minutes, I'm just going to be babbling a little bit about me and my background. We're going to talk today about turning work into play. So this is all about starting with a bit about my background here. And in my background, I began my career early on as a bear. As Kathy mentioned earlier, I worked as Yogi Bear during my college days when I was going high school and college when I was going to get my degree in computer science from Cornell University. So I have a very divergent educational path, 1 degree in computer science, 1 in human services. And after spending 3 summers as a bear and graduating from Cornell University, my career began in the computer game business. What you can see down here is my very first personal computer, the Atari 800, which had a whopping 16K of memory to it. And I actually didn't have the disk drive. I had to start with a cassette tape recorder for the programs I was working on. I worked on about 24 different games, starting out as a programmer, then as a designer and producer, and got out of the business a little bit after about mid-90s or so. And then I began work as a trainer and as a career counselor. And following up on Kathy's earlier plug for the Toastmasters group, I did not think I would have been able to make that career transition if I did not join a Toastmasters club at the time in the mid-90s. And I spent almost 20 years in Toastmasters as a great way of developing my speaking skills. But I've always been a performer at heart. I also have done murder mystery dinner theater. I've also volunteered for an organization called Scare for a Cure, which puts on a live action adventure, Halloween themed adventure every year. And before COVID happened, I was also emceeing and hosting pub quiz for Geeks Who Drink. At the center of the screen, center of my life, 3 wonderful kids who have all grown and left the nest, and one of whom made me a grandfather earlier this year. So you see in my arms there, Damian Thomas Johanigman, son of Alex Johanigman. So I'm now proud to be a grandfather. Call me Pops. So there is my first computer, the Atari 800. I got it in college. It cost altogether over $1,000 for a 16K computer. And as I said earlier, I didn't even get the disk drive. I had to do my first games saved on a cassette tape. And over the years, I worked on games from a lot of different companies, Epix, Atari, Dynamics, Microprose, Origin, Broderbund, TKO, Electronic Arts. How many of those are still in business? Not many. Most game companies have the lifespan of a mayfly. So Electronic Arts is still out there, but most of the rest have since disappeared. Some of the games I worked on, this was a Commodore 64 game called Demon Stalkers, a role-playing game for the IBM PC from Origin Systems, which is an Austin-based game company. That's what brought me down to Austin, was a job at Origin Systems as producer on Savage Empire. And I think probably the single most successful game I worked on about 20-some years ago was a game called Master of Orion, which was a game where you got to explore the galaxy and expand your empire and exploit the planets, and most importantly, exterminate your enemies. So we called it a 4X game. And that was part of the reason why I ended up actually leaving the game business, was the success of that game, interestingly enough. One of the reviews said, "This product will offer enough late nights and missed appointments to make it a definite Game of the Year candidate, as well as Exhibit A in many divorce cases." And that really made me think, what am I doing for people's lives with this? So I retired from the game industry, but I began really thinking about what to do with all of this knowledge I had about game design and game development, and can games really be used to do something besides teach people to shoot up monsters on the screen? I got inspiration from a cat, from the one of the cats I've had, when I was watching her play. And I asked the question then of, what is this cat actually doing? Is that cat learning, playing, working, or all of the above? And chat in your answers on that, if you would. What do you think that cat is doing? D, I see a lot of Ds. I see a lot of all of the above. Mm-hmm. And that's true. We are the only species on the planet stupid enough to separate out working from learning from playing. I tend to believe I cobbled together enough bad Latin to borrow this phrase of cogito ergo ludo, which is, I think, therefore I play. We are thinking creatures, and the more important that is to be able to play, the more intelligent the creature, the more play becomes an important aspect of our lives. Now, when we're talking about turning work into play, this is not really what I'm talking about. There are a lot of companies out there that are really cool, especially the small little startups that have their foosball tables and cots and couches and playrooms and so on and so forth. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually thinking about your work as play. So to do that, I want to define what is play. What do we mean by play? And there really are people who do research into play. One of the interesting people whose work I read was named Bob Fagan, and he did research about why animals play. And he said, in a world continuously presenting unique challenges and ambiguity, play prepares, in this case he was talking about bears, play prepares bears for an evolving planet. Play is a survival instinct. Play is a way that we learn how to do what we need to do to master the environment around us. It looks apparently purposeless. It's voluntary. We do it because we are just inherently attracted to the fun of it all. We tend to lose track of time when we are playing. we tend to lose awareness of ourselves. If we really, somebody caught pictures of us at play, we would not end up looking like nicely posed selfies. We would look awful goofy at many times. Improvisational potential, we are experimenting and trying different things out. And if you remember, but when your mom called you back home for dinner, you didn't want to go. There was a continuation desire inherent in play. And the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. It's depression. And that's one of the things I think is really important to keep in mind, is that work and play are not diametrically opposed. But that lack of ability to really seriously play has been contributing to our sense of depression. So we think about, is playfulness a competitive advantage? And one of my questions is, if you look at these two people who were at the forefront of the computer revolution of the 80s, who really produced the more innovative, groundbreaking solutions? Was it Steve Jobs, or was it John Akers, the IBM president of that era? I would definitely argue it was a more playful Apple that produced that there. Nope, okay. Next question. Which environment do you find the creative problem solvers in? The one on the left or the one on the right? And anybody care to hazard a guess as to which one is the one on the left? I know everybody will say that the one on the right is where they work. Where do you think the one on the left is? What company do you think that is? Anybody chat in an answer? Google. Jim, good guess. That was a shot inside of Google. So, next question. Let's take another example here. So we're going to go back to 1995. As technology is taking off, as the internet is just becoming a thing, when people were talking about the World Wide Web, and the idea of having a shelf full of books that is outdated as soon as you get it as an encyclopedia is going to soon be replaced by online encyclopedias. So if you were an investor, would you invest in a Fortune 100 technology company with a staff of well-paid writers, editors, project managers, with millions of dollars for marketing and sales? Or there's another guy who says, I'm just going to do a grassroots kind of thing and get a bunch of unpaid volunteers to write all the articles. And I'm not really going to do a whole lot of central micromanagement of the whole thing. So we're just going to set up a few loose guidelines, and we're not going to really sell it. We're just going to make it available online. How many of you would invest in the one on the left, the Fortune 100 technology company? Looks like a good bet. We know what that is. That is Microsoft Encarta. Microsoft. Anybody remember Encarta? Anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Anybody? Nope. Encarta? Nope. Anybody? I think I may still have an old disc CD somewhere that has Encarta on it, but I don't know. And of course, the one on the right.
Wikipedia. Yeah.
Wikipedia. Yep, you got it. So we're going to come up with a definition for fun. What is fun? And I actually found a wonderful book called A Theory of Fun for Game Design, written by a game designer I know, Rolf Koster, who's one of the more brilliant game designers I've run into in the industry. He said, fun arises out of mastery. It arises out of comprehension. It's the act of solving puzzles that makes games fun. In other words, with games, learning is the drug. That's what games are in the end. Teachers. Fun is just another word for learning. And one of the things that I do during my day job at ACC is I help train our ACC faculty in how to make learning more fun through making it more interactive and engaging. So games are among the best teachers that we have. But I really want you guys to share with me your thoughts about what do you think are the important elements that can make a game fun and addictive. So share in the chat. Let's jam a little bit on what are the things that make a game a game. What is it that makes it fun and addictive? Achieving a goal, playing with other people, having strategies, the people that you play with, levels, which means going up in your challenge, competition. Difficulty must be in reach with the effort, instant gratification, random successes. It's an interesting point you put in the word random about that, and that's an interesting thing to talk about. Challenge and accomplishment, board games because they make us interact in a fun way. And I think board games are among the most effective social catalysts, a great way for new people to get to meet each other. And one of the things I miss the most right now during the COVID quarantine is getting to sit around a table with a bunch of new people I'm meeting and playing games. Validation and reward for getting something correct on there, and satisfaction. Those are all great things that are important parts of what make a game a game. So here's a couple of definitions that I found. One of which comes from Greg Kostikian, who's a famous board game designer, who said that a game is a form of art in which participants, termed players, make decisions in order to manage resources through game tokens in the pursuit of a goal. That's a fairly lengthy and academic definition, but it has a lot of important elements to it. Another one slightly shorter from Andrew Rawlings and Ernest Adams. One or more causally linked series of in a simulated environment. But my favorite definition comes from Sid Meier, who I consider the best, the most brilliant, the most ingenious game designer of our times. Sid Meier gave us civilization, nothing less than civilization. And he boiled it down to 5 words: a series of interesting choices. And really narrowing it down to the essence of what makes a good game a good game to those 5 words, a series of interesting choices, was a revelation for me. So I want to highlight a few of the terms in these definitions: making decisions, pursuing a goal, having challenges, and having interesting choices as part and parcel of what makes a game fun and interesting and addictive and challenging. So again, I want you guys to share your thoughts about, now that we've talked about what makes a game motivating, what are the things that we use to make work motivating? How do we motivate people at work? Chat in your thoughts on that. Money, teamwork, money so I can play, freedom to exercise it, rewarding success, recognition. Okay, what else? Friendships. You know, whenever I hear people talk about what they will miss most when they leave a job, it's almost always the relationships, the people that they work with. Sense of accomplishment, feeling like making a difference, autonomy, doing what you enjoy, collaboration toward common goals, team buildings, lunches, free meals, ownership, teamwork. All right, really, really good stuff. And I think these are really good ideas, and we're going to share how some of these come into play in turning work into play. In terms of motivating people at work, I did some research, and one of the best books I found on this topic was written by an author named Daniel Pink. He wrote a wonderful book called A Whole New Mind. But following up on that, he wrote this book called Drive, which is subtitled The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And I highly, highly recommend anything Dan Pink writes. He's a brilliant writer because he's got some really fascinating theories that he always backs up with solid research. And there's a lot of good ideas that he shares with people in this process. So I'm going to sum this whole book up in just a few bullet points on this slide. Number one of which, when we talk about extrinsic motivators, in other words, money, he found that those really worked well about a century ago when we were doing rote formulaic tasks for work, when we were all working on assembly lines. If you are doing something that does not require you to think much, just requires you to use your muscles, turn the crank, fit this on, nail this down, turn this screw, and so on and so forth. Doing formulaic stuff is great to be motivated by money, motivated by bonuses, et cetera, et cetera. However, he found that when you are rewarding creative problem solving, which is what most of our work is today, things get a little more complicated. Small rewards can motivate those tasks that require creative problem solving to some degree, but he found that when you got to bigger rewards, it actually impaired our creativity. Just the pressure of having an award and trying to perform to come up with the best idea actually blocks our creativity to a great degree. So it can make it counterproductive to say we're going to give you a $10,000 bonus for whoever comes up with the best new idea. He also found that putting in those extrinsic rewards, if you do things on an if-then basis, sometimes took away from people's internal motivation. It could actually extinguish the joy of doing the work from doing so. If you feel like you're only doing it for the money, you're only doing it for the motivation that your employer is giving you for it. And he found that the most effective use of money is just making sure that people are getting paid well enough that they're not worried about the money, not worried about, will I be able to put food on the table? Will I be able to pay the rent and pay the mortgage and so on and so forth? So that really was an eye-opening revelation for me in doing that. So if we know that, here was my big aha. And what Dan Pink boiled down to what really motivates people today in the 21st century when our work is really creatively oriented are these three things. Number one is autonomy. And autonomy is the ability to be in control of your own schedule, to make your own decisions, to decide how you're going to do, what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, where you're going to do it. Second is mastery. Am I doing something that I can get good at, that I can improve at, that I can find ways to get better and better at it? And third is purpose. Do I feel like there's a meaning behind the work that I do? Do I feel like the work I'm doing is going to make a difference somehow or another? So those three things really came down to the core of what makes us motivated for a really genuinely fulfilling job. And as a career coach, I've seen this play out time and time and time again, that when people can get those three different things in their work, 9 times out of 10, they feel very fulfilled in doing what they do. My big aha came when I looked at that, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And then I looked back at what we had identified as 3 of the big defining elements to a game. And those were these 3 things: decision-making, challenges, and goals, which we just talked about, decision-making, challenges, and goals. And I went, that's the same thing. Autonomy is essentially the same as decision-making. Mastery is the same as challenges. Purpose is the same as goals. The same things that I was using to make people addicted to a game can work to make a job fulfilling. And this gives you some clues as to what to look for when you are out interviewing for a job and when you are talking to and evaluating whether it's going to be a good fit. So we're going to spend the rest of this time defining and designing a game that we're going to call work. And this is not an easy job, by the way. Carl Jung once said that one of the most difficult tasks people can perform, however much others may despise it, is the invention of a good game. One of the most difficult tasks people can perform, however much others may despise it, is the invention of a good game. I always thought when I got into the game business that people would look up to me as, ooh, you're a cool game designer. I found out, didn't give me any kind of cool status or prestige. Nobody was buying me drinks in the bars. Didn't work out that way. All right. So one of the insights into this came from, there's an old legend of the 3 stonecutters. And the story, to encapsulate it down briefly, is this. A gentleman is walking down the road toward a village, and he sees one person by the side of the road cutting a large block of granite. And he stops and he asks the guy, well, sir, what is it you're doing? And the first guy he talks to goes, well, it's hot out here. It's terribly burning and all. And this is a terrible, sucky job, but I'm cutting stone so that we can build buildings here. And, you know, I got to make a living somehow or another and feed the kids. So I'm just cutting these stones. He walks a little farther down the road, sees somebody else doing what looks to be the exact same thing he saw the first person doing. And he's, out of curiosity, stops and asks the guy, sir, what are you doing? And he says, "Oh, sir, I am one of the finest stone crafters in the entire area. You see how smoothly I am cutting the stone and how sharp the edges and the corners are and everything else. This is beautiful stonework that I'm working on here. I'm very proud of my craft." And the guy thanks him and moves on. He goes to the sees a third person by the side of the road near the quarry, cutting a stone. Looks like you're doing the same basic thing. And he says, stops to the guy and says, "Sir, what are you doing?" He said, "Me? Oh, I've got the greatest job in the world. I am helping us build a wonderful cathedral that will go in the center of town and will be a place for everybody in our village to gather in praise of God and build a community where we all cooperate and share and praise together." So you've got three people essentially doing the same job, but obviously three different forms of satisfaction or lack of satisfaction doing so. And it all came from how they viewed their work. Did they see their work as having purpose and meaning to it? And certainly the third person who saw the ultimate end result of his work as helping build community and togetherness for all the people in his village found much greater meaning in his work than just the guy who was complaining and moaning about how hot and sweaty he was on that. So you really want to look for what is it that you are doing that gives you a sense of purpose in your work. And if you cannot find a good way to connect to some sense of purpose in your work, then either dig deeper into it or find a new job, because I think it is essential that we all feel like we are working for something beyond just the paycheck. Every job exists because we are doing something that's making somebody's life better in some way or another. And you need to define for yourself what that is. So in our careers, number one reason why people go to a career coach. As a career coach, I would say the most common question I got was people wanting to find a greater sense of purpose in their work. Think about what is the purpose of your organization. Is your organization working in healthcare? Is your organization working in technology? And if it's in technology, what is the technology doing to make somebody's life better? How is it making somebody's life easier? You should have a good connection between the management of the organization updating everybody on how we are fulfilling the mission, not just how we're meeting this quarter's profit goals. So you need to be able to connect your goals to your overall sense of mission. Oftentimes, this is one of the reasons why people find greater satisfaction in many ways to working in small organizations, is that it's easier to see the connection between the work that you do and the mission of your organization in a small organization. And it's often in a large organization, you feel like you're a cog in a large machine and you can't get that clear view of how you're making a difference in people's lives. And it really can be important to see whether the leadership acts like they are serving the mission or just serving the profit goals. And it's important to get a perspective on that, doing so. So hopefully you've printed out that handout, or if not, get some scratch paper. And I would like you to take a moment and think about how would you define the goal of your job, or how would you define the mission that you want to have in your work? What ways would you like to make a difference in people's lives? I'll give you just a few seconds to think about that and write that down. Second aspect to think about, autonomy, independent decision-making. This is the heart of any good game, is what are the decisions that you make in the game? And companies are working more and more toward giving people more autonomy. I think that's one of the things that we have gotten as a positive out of so many of us working from home, is that it's forced companies to give us more autonomy. They are not going to monitor us from home on how we're spending every minute of our day. There are companies, Netflix was one of the ones that first pioneered the idea of unlimited vacation, that they would treat their employees like responsible adults. If you need to take time off, as long as you are staying on top of your goals and on top of your job. Take whatever time off you need. And a lot of other companies have adopted that over the last decade or so. Google has a famous policy that's their 20% time, that as an employee, you are expected to spend 20% of your time on a project that you decide what you want to do. You come up with, or you team up with other people where you have total autonomy and control over what you work on, as long as it is somehow aligned with Google's mission. And any of us who use Gmail are the beneficiaries of Google's 20% time policy. That was an idea that did not come from Google management, but from a Google employee working in their 20% time. Best Buy, not necessarily in their retail stores, but in their headquarters, implemented an experiment called ROWE, Results Only Work Environment. So they set no expectations on employees about when you got to be in the office, where you got to be, when you got to do meetings, what have you. All that was really important was that everybody had clear goals and clear deadlines and clear expectations. And as long as you met those, nobody cared when you were where you were, and you had total autonomy in doing that. So think for yourself about how much autonomy do you have or do you want to have in your work, about what your work tasks are, what kind of projects you work on, how you do them, when you do them, where you do them, and with whom you do them. So also on your handout or on your scratch paper, take a moment and think about how would you use your autonomy most productively? And would there be ideas that you could initiate if you are in this job? What project ideas could you initiate from your own ideas in your ideal job? When you're interviewing, ask the person you're interviewing with, what kind of initiative can I take in leading projects, starting projects, running projects in this role? One of my favorite jobs when I used to work for the Texas Workforce Commission in what we call a human dynamics training team. And they told us all on day one, if you have a topic that you want to do training in that you think is worthwhile, pitch a proposal. And one of my favorite projects that I got to do working for the Workforce Commission was I put together training on assertiveness. But the only important caveat that they had for me was don't call it assertiveness. Managers don't want their employees to be too assertive. So I renamed it confident communication. But as soon as everybody was in the door in the training room, I closed the door and said, okay, we're going to talk about assertiveness today. So it was fun. All right. Next concept, unique team roles. I was one of those people way back in the 70s when it first came out, the very first Dungeons and Dragons games that came in little cardboard boxes with little, almost like pamphlets. I think Stephen is nodding his head in recognition of what that was like. Actually, my most prized geek possession is a boxed set of the original Dungeons and Dragons manuals given to me by Dave Arneson himself, who was the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons. But in the original edition, it's greatly expanded since then, but the original edition of D&D, there were basically 4 different roles. You could be a fighter, which meant you were the guy with heavy armor and a great big weapon, and you would charge up to the monsters and whack at them with your sword or your axe or what have you. You could play as a thief who would sneak around through the dungeons looking for traps and unlocking secret doors and so on and so forth. You could play as a wizard casting powerful spells that affected entire areas and groups of opponents. And you could be a cleric, which was a form of a priest or medicine man, somebody who could cast spells that helped the entire party or cast spells that would heal somebody up in doing so. And what was really interesting about those games and what made the early games of D&D work was that anytime you were playing together, it meant there would be certain times throughout the night, throughout each of the game, where you were the most important person on the team to overcome the next challenge, whether it was needing to defeat an ugly monster or needing to find and disable the traps, what have you. So your unique skills came into play in a way that other people in your team depended upon you. And that leads into thinking about in your work, what do you consider your unique skills? What is the unique role that you would want to be playing for your team? How do you think you'd want to be the most important player for what kind of aspect and what kind of need in your team? So take a few seconds. Yeah, Brian, being your own manager can make you feel very productive. I just found that I worked for a terrible boss at those points in time. And yeah, we have seen how unlimited vacation policies can backfire if they are not managed right. Sometimes people feel too much pressure to feel like they can't leave the office. There's too much scrutiny on them for that. All right, let's move to the next part. Challenge, mastery, whatever you might want to call it. And I worked at Electronic Arts when we were publishing Jordan and Bird Go One-on-One, which was one of the most successful games in the 80s that we ever put out. Think about what makes challenge a challenge. If you were wanting to become a great basketball player, what's the best way to learn? What's the best way to improve? Would you get better by playing against a 5-year-old kid? By playing against Michael Jordan? Or by playing against a series of opponents where each one is better, slightly better than you at the time? Discover every time I say the word series, the Siri on my phone pops up, thinks I'm talking to her. So obviously most people are saying C, a series of the opponents where each time you are working on getting slightly better and improving and then facing a new opponent. So mastery is the ability to face challenges that are just slightly tougher than your ability at the time, slightly better than you are, and then figuring out how am I going to improve to overcome those challenges. So take a moment to think about which of your abilities do you most want to challenge and improve. It is nice to see the handful of people who have their cameras on that I get to see you actually lowering your head to actually write, answer the questions I'm throwing at you. Next point about games is risk-taking. A game is not a game without some form of risk. And companies give a lot of lip service to wanting to encourage risk-taking. But I think we need to go a little bit further than that. And beyond risk-taking, I think we need to celebrate failure. I think failure can be a good thing. And when you're playing a game and you die, there's actually some optimism that comes out of that most times, because you can look at how you died and go, next time I'm going to do it differently. Next time I've learned how to avoid this. Next time I've learned I'm going to try a different approach to defeating this monster. Anybody who doesn't make mistakes isn't trying hard enough. I think that's a really good motto to live by. And what you see on the left here is a copy of the first Penguin Award, which was given out by Randy Pausch, who did the famous Last Lecture video. And if you've never seen the Last Lecture, Google Last Lecture. It's one of my favorite motivational videos. But he taught computer science courses at Carnegie Mellon. And at the end of each semester, he gave out a first Penguin Award to the team whose project failed in the most ambitious manner. The group that tried the hardest to do something that was going to be hard to accomplish, and even if they failed, it was worth noting and worth celebrating. So he gave out this first Penguin Award. First Penguin Award is named because in the Antarctic, penguins have to go under the water, into the water under the ice to be able to find their food. But at the same time, under the ice and in the water is where the predators are, where the bears and where the others that want to eat penguins are. So it requires a certain amount of bravery to be the first penguin into the water to find out, is there good food down there or is there danger down there? So take a moment on your notes. Ask yourself, what risks have you taken in your work, or what risky things would you want to attempt? What are the things that are on the borders, the boundaries of your abilities that would mean taking a risk? Sherry, I know the feeling when you say I'm certainly a success at lots of failures. I have been congratulated by many people on my resilience and persistence, which I think is a diplomatic way of saying, man, you've failed at a lot of stuff, but you keep going. So, but I think that's part of what made me good at a lot of games, is just the ability to lose, but lose in a way that I try to learn out of it. All right, next idea. Let's talk about scorekeeping. Let's talk about measurements. So again, we want to chat in your thoughts on what are the different ways that performance can be measured in your work. What are the different ways they measure performance in different jobs? KPIs, lots of different KPIs. Innovation, it never fails, it's just try it again thing. So deadlines, yeah, meeting deadlines, meeting your objectives. Predictability, consistency, Peer reviews. That's really interesting form of performance review. Profit, how much does it contribute to the profit? Absolutely. OKRs, clarity of code. Yeah, I remember when I was first programming, nobody could understand anybody else's code, and getting better and better at making clear code. Sales, clear objective. If you are in sales, performance is measured very, very easily. Sometimes how well you do your job doesn't matter. It's how well your business unit does, which counts. And this is one of the frustrating things about a lot of jobs, is that you don't really feel like your efforts always translate into the business goals. User satisfaction, customer satisfaction, and retention, all good measurements. Yep. So let's talk about scorekeeping. I love this quote about the annual performance reviews. Annual performance review. You're wondering what your rating is. I haven't told you all year long. Now it's time to tell you all the things that you've done wrong. Anybody ever have that feeling about performance reviews? Yep. Yeah, I've always felt when we get around to an annual performance review, what you're really getting reviewed on is whatever you got noticed for in the last 2 weeks. But think about what I found to be the most common performance measurement in the workplace. What do you think is the one thing that most everybody across the board gets measured on some degree or another? Arguably, it's time. Especially when we were all working together in the workplace. I think we've freed ourselves a little bit from it when most of us are working from home. But we've all had that sense of, you see that coworker who's always in early, always staying late at work, and we just make an assumption of, oh, they must be a hardworking, productive employee because they're putting in so much time on the job. And I think that's always a bad assumption, that time does not always translate into productivity, does not always translate into, are you really meeting your goals, and are you getting your customers' needs met? So I want you to think about, what are the measurements that you think you would like to be measured on? What are the ways that you think your performance should be scored in your work? I know for me, speaking as a trainer, I do always like to look at the end of workshop feedback forms, the evaluation forms that people fill out. And those are nice and very complimentary, but ultimately my job is all about performance improvement. So I also try to measure with the people that I've done training for is, what's the long-term performance improvement? Do you feel like you're better at your job because of the training you received? And I've enjoyed working in places where we got to measure that as well. So let's look at some examples, scorekeeping. Randy Pausch, who I mentioned earlier, who was the person who gave the last lecture, as a Carnegie Mellon professor teaching computer science, he would have several different team projects, and each project he would rearrange and reshuffle who was on each team. So that by the end of the semester, after all of each of these projects, he would ask people to rate their teammates on how hard did this person work, how creative were their contributions, how easy were they to work with, and so on. These are all fairly subjective measurements, but when you get enough different people measuring you on the same subject, it can be a more objective measurement. And it can be sometimes hard to swallow when you have a bunch of peers saying, no, you really weren't working that hard on our projects. Or, yeah, you really were kind of hard to work with. But once you've got enough feedback from that, then it really does become something that's objective to take a look at. Think about how many people wear Fitbits or Apple Watches or something else that helps monitor your exercise and your activity. Why do we do that? Why do we wear these things that are constantly tracking how much we're moving and where we're going and what we're doing? Who has a Fitbit here? Or some similar kind of tool? So why do you have it, Kathy? You can put your mic on a second. You wear a Fitbit, why?
It was given to me as a gift, but I found that it's it's helpful uh, to keep track of my steps and how much exercise I get, especially now that I'm so sedentary. Mine is a cheap one where it doesn't tell me a lot of stuff. My husband's got a fancy one that plots some medical stuff, which is useful to him. But mine really is just, are you up and moving, or are you not? Are you a sloth?
So does just having that thing that measures your movement give you a motivation to move more?
It has a little thing that says time to get up and do something, and I don't pay attention to that because I'm so sedentary now. But I like at the end of the day to look at it and say, wow, just going around and doing chores, I walked 5 miles, so yay me.
So at the end of the day, just having that measurement of how many miles you walked gave you a sense of reward, sense of personal recognition, sense of motivation.
It did.
And I think that's a really important thing to recognize about anything that helps you keep score. Another great quote I have from Daniel Pink is, a meaningful measurement is its own reward. Just having that thing, that Fitbit that tells you how many miles you walked and just doing what you were doing. So a good measurement, good form of scorekeeping should be something that's fairly objective, that the more frequent you can get that feedback, the more frequent you can get that measurement, the better. So, you could check your Fitbit on a daily basis or even a minute by minute basis on that. It should reflect the mastery of whatever skill you are trying to get better at. It should be based on something that is mostly in your control. Although certainly there are going to be tasks and projects and things that you're doing at work that have some factors that are outside of your control. Anybody who's worked in customer service knows that no matter what, you're going to get some customers who just won't be happy no matter what you do. So you can do your best to improve your customer satisfaction, but there's always going to be a few things, a few bad customers that are outside of your control. You want that measurement to be aligned with the larger goals. You want to balance quality measurements with quantity measurements. And you don't want those measurements to be tied to reward or punishment. That can really put a lot of pressure on things. But I think just having the measurement itself. Bathroom scales count. Absolutely. So I remember back when I joined a Weight Watchers program, I think for me, the most important aspect of it was that when you showed up for any meeting, before you walked into the meeting room, you had to stand on a scale and somebody had to write down that number. And knowing that somebody else was looking at that number was a great motivation. So you want to use several measurements, not just one, and have them balance each other. So take a moment on your handout or on your scratch paper. Think about ways that you would want to measure your own performance. And it's also one of my favorite questions to ask in an interview is, how is performance measured in this job? For me, that has been a make or break question. If I hear what they say and I think to myself, oh, I would hate to be measured on that on a daily basis, then I know that might not be a job I'm going to be happy in. And if they talk about a measurement like customer satisfaction, or if a measurement like training effectiveness that I feel is important and I feel aligned with, then that's going to make a difference in how much satisfaction I find in that job. All right, we got about 10 minutes left. Moving to the next phase. Next thing to chat about. I want you to share, what are the different ways that we can recognize and reward employees? How do we most often recognize and reward employees in our work? Promotions, that's ultimately, it's kind of like going up a level in a game. Promotions and raises. Visibility, getting a new role or getting a new task that gives you more visibility is a good form of recognition. Yeah. Improving and increasing your network. Yep. Acknowledgement, just somebody knowing that somebody has seen what you've done and acknowledging your contributions, either publicly or privately. Organizational awards, yeah, we've had been in many organizations that had some kind of award recognition, formal recognition program, and flexibility in there. And Stephen has said, you know, it's important if you're in a management position to ask the employees how they want to be rewarded. So this is what we're really getting at with this. I had a friend who is a game designer named George McDonald, who once said, I could get players to happily spend all day chopping down trees with large fish if I gave them the right feedback and rewards. Dan Pink, biggest motivator by far is making progress. Any way that we have of making and measuring that progress is its own reward. And I found that those things that you talk about in gamification, shiny badges. Badges are a form of reward, but it's really important that the badges do actually represent something that you worked to earn. Back in Boy Scouts, we all worked for merit badges, little tiny pieces of cloth, colorful pieces of cloth, intrinsically or extrinsically no value to them. They were worth a few cents, but they represented the work that you put in to earn that. Anybody who's ever been in any form of martial arts, and if you achieve higher and higher belts, when you get to a black belt, you cherish that, not because of the monetary value of the belt itself, but because what it represents in terms of the effort and the years of work that you put into it. At the center of that is something that I personally still hold from over 20 some years ago. Oh, I take it back, it's over 30 years ago, back in the 80s, when I worked at Electronic Arts. And this was literally a shiny badge. This was literally a plastic badge that they gave out at the Friday afternoon beer bashes to some employees who'd done something extraordinary during that week. And I still feel proud of the Star Performer badges I earned because I know what I did to earn them. So other kinds of feedback and rewards, performance progress tracking displays, award certificates, any type of team recognition or recognition to higher ups, simple thank you cards that a manager or somebody higher up gives to you to just say that you've been noticed and appreciated in doing that. Gift baskets, gift cards, time off, schedule flexibility, and ultimately leveling up, as we would do in a game, to more interesting, more challenging, more highly visible assignments. But what's really important is not to have if-then expectations with those rewards, but to have them just kind of come out naturally, come up sometimes by surprise in doing so. Think about and write down, what are the forms of recognition you like? Do you like to have somebody publicly call you out in front of all the rest of the company and say, hey, Jeff did this amazing thing last week? Would you rather get just a private email from your manager saying, hey, I really appreciate what you did? Do you like having things to display in your work area? You can see behind me, I've got some trophies and stuff on my shelf, mostly from Toastmasters that won them many, many years ago, but still like to look at them on a daily basis. Games, as somebody said, there is randomness to games. There's something unexpected. I think that surprise element is really valuable to think about in your work. Who wants to be in a job where you know that the work today is exactly the same as what I did yesterday and the day before, and it's going to be the exact same work tomorrow? So having something that changes, something that gives you more variety, and you want to be able to ask, if you're interviewing for a job, how much variety is there, and how will things be changing as I move forward? But in terms of recognition and reward, this was one of my favorite examples. When I worked for the Texas Workforce Commission, I was asked by my manager, Krista, to help out with a conference that was a little bit shorthanded and on short notice. So, and you know, I viewed it as part of my job, so I was happy to go help out with this conference. So about a week after it was all over with, I get a call from the front desk saying, Mr. Johanigman, there's a package for you at the front desk. And you can see what this is. This is a package from Tiff's Treats. Oops, go back. From Tiff's Treats. And the note says, Linnell and Jeff, I so appreciate y'all stepping in with a moment's notice, working 2 days at the forum. Share these treats as you see fit. Now, admittedly, because Linnell's name was on the note, I did share some of the cookies with Linnell. but I don't know if we shared those with anybody else. Pretty sure we finished them all off ourselves. But that was a total unexpected surprise. Now, if Krista had said before the conference, before asking me to volunteer, hey, if you volunteer for this, I'll give you some cookies, I might have been insulted. I might have felt like, is that all my work effort is worth? Is just a bunch of cookies? But the fact that this was unexpected, this was not contingent, this was just an impromptu expression of my manager's appreciation of my willingness to pitch in, that I really did feel genuinely rewarded. And I think that makes a lot of the difference in doing so. So I'm going to wrap up. My last thought is a quote. And if you downloaded the handout, you'll find this also written out on the back of, or on page 2 of the handout. And it's from James Michener, who said, "The master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his information and his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence at whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he is working or playing. To him, he is always doing both." So, final question, how do you really turn work into play? I think it's just a series of interesting choices. So if you want to find out more, you want to talk to me, dive in. There's my website. There's my phone number. People Type Consulting. I'm in the process of getting a new website built right now. So the old one kind of looks several years old. I'll apologize in advance for that.